Thank you, Krista. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being on time for the tag to start. I think we've got some pretty good business. It should go quick, we're hoping. So why don't we start with the welcome and introduction. So let's go down the list, and how about is there anybody? I will just go down the list. My name is Corey Welker. I'm the chair of the tag for UPC code. And Steve?
Yeah, I'm Steve Simpson with Seattle Area Pipe Trades, representing plumbers on the tag.
Bill Masaki.
Bill Masaki here, representing the Mechanical Contractors Association of Western Washington.
Kevin Meske. If you wanted to say something and introduce yourself, I'm just going down the list as I see it on the screen. Stoyan.
Stoyan Bumbalov, I'm the State Building Code Council Managing Director and just came from a very difficult IBC Technical Advisory Group meeting.
Well, we'll hope you enjoy our meeting more than theirs.
Yes, I hope so.
Eric Mills.
Eric Mills with Hargis Engineers on the consulting side of things.
John Sue.
Good afternoon. Yeah, John Sue. I'm a technical consultant with the Washington Association of Building Officials.
Thanks for being here.
And he attended the same IBC meeting, so.
Ken Burlett.
Ken Burlett, Seattle Fire Department.
Sandy.
Preet Sandhu, Kane County Plans Examiner.
And Steve Hart.
Steve Hart, Public Health, Seattle, King County, Plumbing Inspector.
In case I missed anybody, does anybody want to introduce themselves? Well, let's move on from that. Is procedurally, do we need to confirm that we have a quorum?
Well, let's do officially the roll call then. I think we do, but let's do the roll call.
Okay.
Corey?
Here.
Mike Hagan? Steve Hart?
Here.
Eric?
Here.
Bill?
Here.
Mike? Steve Simpson?
Here.
And Sandy? If I said the name wrong, sorry. Sandhu?
Yep, that's correct. Yep.
Did I say it right?
Sir, you did.
Okay, I achieved something for today. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think we have a quorum.
Well, excellent. Okay, so let's move on to the agenda item number 2, which is review and approve the agenda.
Mr. Chair, if you'd like, I'd like to move to approve the agenda.
Second that.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it. Let's move on to item number 3 on the agenda, which is review and approve the minutes from 5/11.
And we don't have the minutes because on 5/11, we didn't really have a meeting.
We closed the meeting, yes?
We didn't have quorum. And we closed the meeting, yes.
So, and you have to help me procedurally. How do we move past this agenda item?
We just passed the agenda item and we get to the next one.
Well,
Very
shouldn't
good.
you approve the minutes from January since that was not done at the last meeting?
Krista, do you have these minutes in handy?
Should be popping up.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, if it suits you, I'd like to make a motion to approve the January meeting minutes that are on our screen currently.
Thank you. Krista, can you move that down? Is it January 5th? Is that what I saw?
January 5th.
We have a motion. Can I have a second, please?
Second,
Thank you. We have a motion and second to approve the minutes from January 5th. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Nay.
aye,
Any opposed?
And we will correct Jed's name.
Oh, yes, Sherman is not spelled correctly.
I accept that as a friendly amendment.
Okay, so we will move on to agenda item 4, which is review the 2021 UPC code change proposals. I have the list in front of me that I printed out, and just in discussion, does anybody have an issue? We just follow straight down this list, starting with the section 608.5 and working down. Is that all good with everybody? So starting with the proponent was the city of Bellevue. 608.5 discharge piping. I'd like to open that up for discussion.
Mr. Chair, I can speak to this one a little bit. I was on the council when this particular code got revised, and we didn't catch a piece of it at that time, and it's been unamended since. The issue, I think Chris is getting ready to pull the information up. The issue is that it used to require in the code to have rigid piping from the discharge piping for a temperature pressure relief valve of a hot water system. And somehow when they went to the new material section in ASME, it got rid of having that component. And so the concern, and it's extremely valid concern of the plumbing officials over in Bellevue, is that that you would potentially have a kink situation with a flex hose, plus you have a reduction of flow with flexes. So what's been happening, and there's no way to write up a correction for someone just hooking basically a flex hose as opposed to straight piping, which is what it used to be. So I would speak to support this code change for the life, health, and safety benefits that would give. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any other comments on this particular issue?
yeah,
Proposal?
Steve Hart.
Yeah.
Rather than saying with no, I think it might be more appropriate to say without coils or flexes.
And shall be straight lengths only without coils or flexes. Change the word no to without.
Does it need to go back to saying rigid, or is that straight links only? Is that assume that?
I think straight length only would get us there.
Do we just take out no coils and flexes, just say straight links only? Because I think what he wants to make sure of is that you don't have, because somebody can take a flex and make it straight, right?
Yeah, not well, but yes.
But I mean, in theory, what happens is those get kinked, and I've seen them before, and I mean, doing repairs and take them off and, you know, pipe it in full pipe size. So how do you want to insert the word without, Steve? Back to your suggestion.
She's got it up on the screen, Corey.
Oh, sorry. I'm
Yeah.
looking at my
Vision.
notes.
Is this going to eliminate soft copper? I mean, you could take a roll of soft copper tubing and straighten it out. And then something comes along and falls on it, and now you have a trap or even a pinch point.
Yeah, I think it would eliminate soft copper, Bill. Because the soft copper would be in a coil.
Well,
Yeah,
the-
but not installed. Not installed. You could take it out of the coil,
Oh,
straighten it,
sure,
to
straighten it.
comply with this section that says straight links only.
Yeah.
But then you still have a annealed tubing in there,
Well,
which
we could, right after the word straight, add the word rigid. And that would definitely define the type of material from soft copper, which is soft, it's annealed, to being rigid, which it's not rigid. It's soft, it's annealed.
yeah, I think that cleans it up.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, I don't know.
Oh,
if
I'm
you can-
sorry. John Hughes got his hand up. John, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I'm not a plumber. I'm just reading what's written there. Does this preclude having like an L in it if it's straight links only? Okay, I just want to, because I've seen lots of that, right? You get the pipe and it L's and 90-degree bend. I just want to make sure that that's not precluded by this.
No, John, what this would preclude an individual from doing, it'd be taking a hot water tank flex that you use to connect the cold and hot water supply, the corrugated ones, and using that to connect the relief piping.
So do we want to, I mean, we all understand that it applies to pipe, but do we have to act, because I'm just trying to read the whole thing at once and see if there's a better way to verbalize it. Do we need to add the word piping?
No.
I don't think so. I think it's pretty straightforward what we're talking about, because the section is discharge piping.
Okay,
Mr. Chair, if it's acceptable to you, I'd like to move that we approve this.
we have a motion for approval. Do I have a second?
Second,
Should we do a roll call on these proposals so that it's clearer, or is it okay to do aye and nay?
It's okay to do I and nay.
All right, so we have a motion and a second to approve the first proposal for section 608.5. All those in favor say aye.
aye.
Hey,
Aye.
Any opposed? We'll move this proposal forward as adjusted. The next proposal on the list is Appendix M UPC for the peak water demand calculator. And I'll open it up to the floor for discussion.
I actually have a question in general about all the appendices, because there's a lot of them that are not adopted. I'm just curious of the history of why they're not just adopted up front.
Ken Burlett's got his hand up. Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, my comment is, part of the submitting your code change proposal is to include the text. And it's right there on the document itself that you should include it. And it wasn't included in any of his code change proposals. It just says, hey, we want to adopt these appendix sections, but the words just aren't there. So I'm hoping that you guys will just maybe reject these since they weren't submitted properly.
It's a good point. So we overlooked that. I assume the proposal is to adopt appendix, the model code appendix M, N, and F. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think for these next three proposals, are they all missing the appropriate language?
Well, they'd have to include the whole appendix in there, what you just referenced. So I just want to adopt this appendix. And you'd have to just basically recopy the appendix in there where it asks for the amended section to read as follows.
So currently the appendix is not specifically not adopted by the council. The appendix is just as a regular appendix will be effective if adopted by a local ordinance. And you want the council to adopt it for all jurisdictions. Is that correct?
That's what it looks like he's asking.
Yes, it
and-
appears that's what he's asking.
Yeah, in terms of the appendices and what we adopt, that's actually in statute. What specifically portions of the plumbing code that we do adopt, and it does mention the installation standards in there, but that's it in terms of any appendices.
Well, that's not actually mentioned in statute. That was done through this proposal process.
Yeah.
And this particular appendix, Appendix M, is now being referenced by the Commercial Energy Code.
So would this get us in correlation with the energy code, Krista? Is that what you're kind of?
Right, that's part of the reason I believe why they proposed it.
Okay. Can I ask a quick question procedurally, Stoyan and maybe Krista? So
This is Dick.
So when these proposals come in, you get them into the State Building Code Council. Are they reviewed by council staff prior to coming to this meeting, or are we looking at them for the first time, even though they're past the deadline for being able to submit it correctly? Is that the way the process is working? I was on the council. I know how we used to do it, but I just like some clarification.
So I just found my notes, and I don't know if I emailed the proponent, but I just found my notes, and I have a note to send an email telling the proponent that we don't need copy paste from the model code language. So this is why you don't have the entire appendix there in the submittal. So it's not the language that is proposed in addition to what we have in the model code. This is a proposal to adopt the model code.
They adopt the appendices of the model code.
From the model code, yes.
Okay. Well,
so we consider this the form and the proposal, we consider it good enough for review. Otherwise, we had to copy paste the entire appendix, and it's not needed. It's not a proposal to modify the appendix. It's a proposal to adopt the appendix.
Is it, and is it a full adoption of the appendix, or would this be an appendix that you could use if you chose to? Would it mandatorily make it the law of the land? You have to use Appendix M if you're using in residential construction, or is that a use it if you'd like to appendix?
So if the council doesn't act on it, the appendix is allowed by local jurisdictions for adoption. And as I read the rationale right here, I think my interpretation of that is that the proposal
Optional, not
is,
mandatory.
well, the appendix is adopted as optional, not mandatory, allowing use of its provisions and guidance in this installation, blah, blah, blah. I think the intent was to adopt this appendix as mandatory, but it's again, my interpretation, and I shared the screen. So if you read it differently, then I'm wrong.
Well, you know, the way that section reads, it just says adopted as optional, but not mandatory. So meaning if I wanted to plumb the old way, I could, I wouldn't have to use this Appendix M if I'm in that type of structure. If you wanted it mandatory, you would get rid of the optional piece and just say the requirements, if you're in the residential construction for multifamily or single family, you have to use Appendix M. That would be the mandatory language, I think. And I could be wrong.
In looking at the Appendix M, the applicability, it says it provides a method for estimating demand. It doesn't say that, you know, it's more like, okay, here's another option to give you to determine the peak water demand. It's not necessarily like, you know, this is the way you have to do it. It's kind of the way I read it.
Right. And Eric, I think what it does is it gives you an engineering method to get to smaller pipe size, increase the velocity and you know, and those kinds of things. So it kind of, it does a few things from an energy, probably an energy beneficial component, saving hot water. Instead of running 1/2 inch, you'd run 3/8 potentially in some applications.
Right, this is similar to what we do with adoption of Appendix A.
Yeah.
And this is Steve Hart. I believe that the language is ambiguous because people already have the option, if they choose to adopt their own code like Seattle has, they can impact it by adopting whatever Appendix C they wish to pull into their own code, which is specific to their jurisdiction. However, outside of Seattle, those that have their enforcement of the plumbing code would then not be optional. So therefore the language in here would be incorrect, and it would be one of the allowances to use Appendix M. So I guess for the way that I'm reading this, adopted as optional, a local jurisdiction would have to have its own plumbing code to adopt it as a local jurisdiction. If I'm wrong, then maybe I'm incorrect, but I think that you already have to have your own plumbing code to adopt whatever you want out of the code that's not state adopted. And so for that, and even in spite of what I just said, I am not in favor of having Appendix M adopted in whole as part of this code cycle.
This was brought up as a tie-in with the energy code. What exactly is the energy code looking at in Appendix M?
If you size your piping per Appendix M, you get some of the credits in the additional efficiency credits section, I believe.
That might not be so connected because Appendix C allows the same probability of use, and the parameters of system sizing is very closely connected. And for that being said, using a demand calculator versus Appendix C, which is, and I don't believe unless somebody has a homegrown spreadsheet where they can input data and spit out system sizing, etc. It's pretty much very closely related. The only difference between the two is Appendix C can be used appropriately as wanted for the occupancy, as Appendix M is very specific what it can be used for. So you're only talking about certain occupancies or structures, meaning multifamily, hotel, motel. And so when you use Appendix C, you have those same probabilities of use. And I'm not really sure where the savings is occurring at because the sizing is very similar. The only difference is that where and when it can be used versus multifamily versus what I just said.
So C would apply to all buildings, but M applies specifically to single family and multifamily.
In this language, yes, meaning these are multifamily and they do say for single and multifamily dwellings.
Mhm.
But if you run this calculator, you don't brush into making a savings. And so I'm not really sure why they even incorporate single family, because it really doesn't come into play. It's usually used like for, as I stated, if it were multifamily dwellings that were like multi-story structures, hundreds of units, not a singular single family home.
So Steve, can you help clarify then? You said you were opposed to moving this forward for what specifically is the thing that's the deterrent for you?
Well, the issue that I have with it is that Appendix M is a system sizing calculator that the layman can use, but because they use it, they may not be able to discern where correction or error is occurring because it's on a higher level. Whereas Appendix C, which gives you the same demand, and in our jurisdiction in the city of Seattle, we require that be used and incorporated for design by a design professional, somebody in the discipline of understanding really what the accommodations of Appendix M derive as far as system sizing goes. And it's from a engineering perspective and not prescriptive. It may spit out numbers that are in layman dialogue for velocities and size and even GPMs and fixture units and so on for runouts and branch mains. But if there is an error in any of the documentation, the person that is using that demand calculator, not being a design professional, would not know the error of that design. They may, but I doubt it. And this is the conversation that I have and had with other individuals regarding this. Appendix M is really a type of system that, like in our jurisdiction, the city of Seattle, where we require somebody who has a higher level of understanding and knowledge of what the components and how you arrived at the loading and the sizing of these systems. And you can do the same thing with Appendix C using individual numbers, but in a more calculated way that's more robust, that really requires the knowledge and the experience and in the discipline of engineering. Whereas you're given a calculated sheet in Appendix M and all that information is spit out towards you based on what you're applying into it. And for that, I don't think that the community is ready yet until enough Appendix M systems have been installed so that those who can see them will understand how they're being used. In fact, I believe maybe 4 years ago, Appendix M being applied in a project in Seattle was the first in the nation. So you can see how in the infancy of this design calculator, how far away we are from really getting true measurable empirical data when these systems are installed. I think the industry could probably handle it, but the average designer or system through data is just not ready for it yet.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Micah, you've got your hand up. Go ahead.
Thanks, Corey. I just kind of had a question for Steve, maybe on this. When you're talking about getting data for these installed systems, are you looking at those as being filed under an alternate method? And how would you then identify those as being an Appendix M system and collect data on that?
So thanks, that's a good question, Micah. So currently right now, we do use an alternate method in order to use Appendix M because the calculations that are behind the scenes in that component, they're unknown. It's proprietary to IAPMO. And for that reason, IAPMO has collaborated with those individuals who are currently using Appendix M as their design for their projects. And to the best of my knowledge, that study or survey is ongoing and active right now based on how the system function and the reaction to using Appendix M of the system sizing itself. And I believe there are 2 of them now. And if somebody wanted to investigate that further, they could talk to Dan Cole at IATMO, who is one of the originators of Appendix M and who may be working with a couple engineering organizations or mechanical contractors here within the city of Seattle as some of the early adopters of this Appendix M. The only reason we adopted it here, and of course, we allow people to use it recently without an alternate that are under the 2018 code, is just because of the fact that there's a study going on from 2018 and the alternates that we're submitting, and still there are some 2015 projects that come in that propose Appendix M that we do require them to use an alternate, but in the 2018 anybody can use it, but most people don't attempt to use this because they just really do not understand what the issues are that are behind using Appendix M. And those that have done this with Appendix M are pretty much design build entities. They have on staff design professional teams.
Thank you, Steve. Bill Masaki, go ahead.
Thank you, Corey. Hey, back to Steve again. You mentioned that this may not be applicable to or help single family dwellings. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, the loading, when you look at certain levels of sizing based on parameters of minimum and maximum loading, either by GPM or velocity of material being proposed, what you discover is that the amount of allowance that you can use on a single piece of pipe based on pressure and velocity or gallon per minute use at the fixture, what you'll discover is that there's a margin within there that maybe you might attract in a very large home a couple extra fixtures on a loaded piece of pipe, whether it be a run out from a branch main or the branch main itself may increase slightly, maybe one pipe size or not at all, and which is very closely related to maybe even a prescriptive environment, because the parameters between how much you can load into a piece of pipe are present. Meaning like you might get 7 water supply fixture units on a 1/2-inch pipe at so many DFUs, or excuse me, at so many water supply fixture units based on a prescriptive approach. But although you may input data that is out of Appendix M in similar, you may still end up with a 1/2-inch pipe. It may not change the size of the pipe system at all. It does change it when you get into larger uses and more uses and combined uses like that in a multi-story, multi-family structure.
Right, but if you're looking at adopting this for, say, for use in single family dwellings for, say, home building outside of, Seattle, where you have larger structures, there's nothing in here that's detrimental. It may help a little bit, it may not in some cases, but I don't see any reason why we wouldn't allow it statewide. I'm looking at, looking at past Seattle, and I know you have your own issues there with large multifamilies.
Yeah, that's just my opinion on Appendix M. I don't think that it's been used widely enough either in the country or in our local jurisdiction for somebody to say that this is a great approach and we should continue it and use it. Usually there's some sort of empirical data that is backing the use of a system like Appendix A and B have been around forever. And there's been some oscillating with Appendix I for installation standards based on different materials, but A and B have been around forever. I wouldn't have a problem with somebody incorporating A or B right into the body of the code. And not even be an appendix C, but that's because they have been around for all the time that I've been around in plumbing. And I think empirical data would state that there's no issues using A or B as an appendix C and moving it into full adoption for use. I do have my reservations for Appendix M because it hasn't been around long enough. And there's really no empirical data that people are living off of to say that there are no issues using Appendix M. And there shouldn't be more information shared in Appendix M based on empirical data collected for the use of that type of system. Like I said, it's only been 4 years, and I know of only 2 projects that for sure IAPMO and that entity are established a relationship for looking at data. And so, you know, to unleash this on the state when we have unknowns setting out there, you may inadvertently open the gates for people to have issues in the future just because we jumped into it too quickly. And that's only my reservation. I think that it's probably going to be safe, but that doesn't mean everybody has seen everything or all the unknowns are known, and that takes time.
Thank you, Steve. Mr. Simpson, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is either for Kristen or Stoyan, specifically correlation with the energy code. I know in the hierarchy of codes is so if they have something in the energy code that tells us we can get points off certain using certain things, is that something that we're going to have to do regardless of what we decide to do here or not? Or what does that look like for a code path? So if someone wants to get those points on that energy code to get whatever that looks like, so then they would have to go to that jurisdiction, ask them to use that appendix and under alternate means and methods. Is that the pathway that would have to happen if we don't adopt this?
Plumbing is not my best area of expertise, but let me start, and then Krista will correct me if I'm wrong. I'm sure she always finds something I say wrong. But so I showed you this Appendix A, B, and I because these 3 appendices are adopted by the council. So they are adopted for the jurisdictions. There is no need for a special adoption by jurisdiction. And Micah is here and other folks that work for jurisdiction. So again, if I'm wrong, correct me. I just want to start with the procedure. And then we have Appendix C and we have Appendix M. And the question I have is, are they available for jurisdictions to adopt by local ordinance? And I think they are. Again, this is the first step before we move to the energy code. So let's say I live in Lacey, and in city of Lacey says, we want to adopt Appendix M. Can they do that? I think they can.
Yes.
Okay.
So if
So
the local, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but if the procedure I remembered from my years on the council was that if the local amendment affected single family or multifamily construction, it has to be approved by the State Building Code Council.
that was my second step. Yes. That's
Okay,
correct.
thank you.
So now when we move to the energy code and the energy code says, okay, you get some credits, and my energy code knowledge is even worse than the plumbing code. So I'm sure Krista will jump in, but when the energy code says you get some credits using Appendix M, and then this Appendix M is not adopted by, again, I will use City of Lacey. It's not adopted by City of Lacey, then what is going to happen? As a layperson that reads the codes, I would say, well, this credit cannot be used. And I will give the stage to Krista here to clarify, how it works.
Right. So essentially you'd just be relying on the jurisdiction to say, yes, you can use that and get the credits, or no, you can't use that credit path. You'll have to do something else. And I'm not sure how the user of the energy code would know that they would need prior approval to go through the jurisdiction before doing their design work.
Okay, so it can be used as an alternate means and method, but they'd have to go through that process. Is that correct? If this doesn't get adopted.
It needs to go to jurisdiction for approval, yes.
Okay. Is there any more discussion on this appendix? And if not, I'll take a motion. Anybody?
Hey, Corey, it's Bill. I'll move for approval.
I have a motion for approval. Do I have a second?
Second that.
Okay. I have a motion and a second for approval of Appendix M to move it forward for the peak water demand calculator. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay.
Nay.
Should we do roll call? I only
My
counted
phone was
3.
muted.
I think will help. So, oh, sorry, not the right one. Come on. Okay. Steve Hart,
Nay.
Eric,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
Steve Simpson,
Aye.
Sandy. Ah, come on, sorry about that. Sandy?
Hey, no.
No, okay. So we have, without the chair, we have 3 yes and 2 no.
So that is approved to move forward to the council.
That is approved to move forward to the BFP committee, yes.
Well, that's right. I'm a part of a new committee. We go to the next committee next. Okay. Let's move on to the next proposal, which was UPC Appendix N. Impact of water temperature on the potential for scalding and Legionella growth. I'd like to open it up for discussion with the group. Does anybody have any information on this proposal?
Are they
Go
gonna,
ahead, John.
Yeah, sorry, I just had a kind of question. It's sort of related to what you guys just did on Appendix M as well. If seems to me that if it's not mandatory, there's no need to adopt it. If it's optional, it's optional. People can use it or not.
Yes, John, thank you. That was on my mouth. I just didn't say it, but if it's allowed by a local jurisdiction for adoption, and if the intent of the proponent was to make the council adopt this an optional, well, I guess if it's optional for who? For the local jurisdiction or for the designer, for example? So these are different things. What I see in the rationale, if this is rational, proposal for adoption, it doesn't say, oh, yes, as optional, not mandatory. So if it's optional,
That's what AMMs are for, right? Alternate means and methods.
Yes, but optional for who? Again, there is a difference if it's optional for the jurisdiction to adopt or optional for a designer to use. If it's optional for the jurisdiction to adopt and the jurisdiction says, no, it's not adopted, then the designer can't use it. But if it's optional for the designer, because the state adopted it as optional, then the jurisdiction has no say in that. And I think it's important.
Okay. I'll grant you that.
And I don't know the answer. I mean, I see the rationale, it's not clear to me. So my statement was 90% question. I guess it would be a really good idea if the proponent was here.
They're not. Larry, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just want to let you know, I tried to come into this with my phone and use your code, and you can't get into this meeting with the phone. So there's probably people out there that are trying to get into this meeting that can't get in because the password's not working on the phone. Anyway, so I raced to my computer. I'm here now. Thanks.
Thank you, Larry. I wonder if the proponent was trying to use their phone. So does anybody have any information on this Appendix N or any discussion to help us move forward here? Well, then I'll take a
No,
motion.
and I was just reading through the appendix, and it looks more like it's just information. Because now it's a document that identifies such temperature ranges and the potential dangers.
I know that part of the discussion regarding Legionella has just been to try to get information out. I've been to a couple seminars. And I don't know that, I just know it's important that we consider it. And part of it is if you can make pipe sizes smaller, you can increase the velocity, which will help clear the biofilm. And these other things in Appendix M are just helpful to kill it and keep it out of the water system and before it goes airborne. And anyway, I just really wish the proponent was here to help us with the information.
Mr. Wilker, this is Ray Shipman. I just want to let you know that I was able to call in from a phone.
Okay, Ray, thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Hi all, this is Steve Hart. I just got off the phone with Ed Holmes, who informed me that the concept behind the verbiage in his statements for N, M, and F are specific to the adoption of a jurisdiction. So that takes away the ambiguity of how we're reading, how it's being proposed. The context of the proposal is that a jurisdiction, like in your example of the city of Lacey, their option to adopt, but not mandatory.
Which they have anyway.
Okay.
That going back to John's statement.
But Stoyan, so you had up that section where it says we adopt the appendices AI and I can't remember the other one, to be quite honest with you. I should know it after 9 years on the plumbing tag.
A, B, and I.
Yeah, A, B, and I. So what that would do though, if we did adopt these, it would add A, B, I, M, and you know what I mean? Then you would have something right in the WAC that says that those appendices are adopted.
Well, This
I mean,
is-
that's,
Yes, but my question for you folks is, I'll use my wild card. I'm new here, so I'm not sure how you enforce that. But A, B, and I, in my opinion, if it's adopted, then it means that it's not a choice for the jurisdiction anymore. It's already adopted.
That's true, but the applicability of A, B, and I is that I do not need your permission to incorporate A, B, and I in any design that I choose. I can incorporate that in an engineered system, or I can incorporate it into a prescriptive approach of a system design. The concept behind what is being proposed right now of M, N, and F is to incorporate that into the option of the jurisdiction. A jurisdiction already has that option. So the way that it's being proposed in the document by Mr. Holmes is really already allowed as an option. And as to the comments of Steve Simpson, who just stated that if we were to move forward with the proposal and incorporate F, M, and N as no longer permission to use, but an allowance, there would be those three new additions to the plumbing code of appendices. In other words, it would read appendices adopted would be A, B, F, M, I, and N. That's how it would read. It wouldn't read just A, B, and I. Right now, all the remaining appendices other than A, B, and I are already optional. You can submit under an alternate and approved or denied by that jurisdiction. A, B, and I, the jurisdiction has to accept those because they are adopted as an appendice. So I, again, express that if we move forward and we continue under the umbrella like we did with Appendix M for F and N, we're going to effectively basically state to the rest of the state that you can use N, F, and M without the authority of the local jurisdiction. You don't need their permission to use those appendices. That's what is being stated every time we adopt each one of these that is being proposed. And so for that, again, I'm just going to say in advance, I will oppose F and I will oppose N, just like I opposed M. I'm not in a favor of adopting appendices that have no history of empirical data to say that they are good for the industry or good for plumbing, because there's no data to live off of, like we have A, B, and I, which has been around since I started plumbing.
Thank you, Steve. Those are good points. Larry, you have your hand up? Or maybe he just forgot to pull his hand down. Understanding what is intended here for Appendix N, is there any more discussion?
Yeah, Corey, I had one question or confirmation. This is this entire appendix is lined on the margins, so I'm presuming this is the first go around for this appendix. Yeah, so
I believe it's new.
Yeah, leaning into Steve's comment a little bit, I think it'd be safer to let this marinate a bit or we take it statewide.
Is there any other discussion?
Mr. Chair, I move to reject this motion for this amendment.
I have a move to reject this motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to reject this motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. We are gonna not move Appendix N forward. Next up, Appendix F. The firefighter breathing air replenishment systems. Open up to the floor.
Yeah, this is Steve Hart. I follow the same instructions I mentioned a moment ago that I would not approve for the same reason that this is maybe a code cycle or two within the appendices. And there should be some sort of regulation on this. But I'm just not really sure who and where or how. I'm really defaulting at this time to look at more in the format of that being under the fire department in their purview of how they view this requirement. And so at this time, again, I say I would not adopt this appendix. I would not adopt it at this
Thank you,
time.
Steve. I think Mr. Ken Burlett can shed some light. Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, thanks, Corey. So just be upfront, City of Seattle Fire Department does not support this appendix. I was part of the fire code tag. We did not support the appendix in the fire code for firefighter breathing air replenishment systems. And this proposal is a little bit different because it doesn't say optional in here. And if this was adopted and enforced, it has specific requirements for high-rise buildings over, I think 200,000 square feet. So it wouldn't just be a Seattle issue. It would definitely be a statewide issue for larger warehouse buildings. I do understand that there needs to be some regulation for these when they do get installed, but this section, if it got adopted, requires it. So it's not just a reference standard telling somebody how to do something. It's actually says you must do it if you meet these certain criteria. So City of Seattle Fire Department is against this. And the other issue is number 7 on the submittal. When it says, is there an economic impact? And it says no, that is wrong. And everybody needs to realize that there's a huge economic impact for requiring these. So I thought this should have been rejected to begin with. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. I appreciate that. Is there any more discussion? Larry, you brought your hand up again. Are you with us?
Yeah, I am. Would they even use it? I mean, normally they're packing all their own air, so they know that it's good air. I mean, I don't know if they'd even use it. Kind of like the fire hoses that are inside the building, they use their own. Seems like a lot of waste of money.
Larry, people can improve on what I know, but we've seen these systems come up in the last few years, maybe 5 years back. What they are is if a firefighter runs out of breathing air, they have a space in the building that they can quickly charge their gear and replenish their air. So it's an auxiliary system to support the firefighters when they're in a multi-story building. And so that piping is super high PSI, usually in stainless. And currently the fire marshals are the ones that take care of making sure that it's installed correctly. They need places to hook up to it. They have alarms that have to be specific, and it all runs through the fire code and NFPA. And so that's what the system's for. And so
so do the plumbers install it then, Corey? Or
plumbers and sprinkler fitters have been installing the systems depending on how it's being installed, and right now it's kind of up to the particular contractor, whatever they choose, or whoever takes the scope of work. And so we both do it. We both, depending on the type of system. There's swedge lock, there's stainless steel orbital welded. They're complicated systems inside the building, and part of it is the PSI is super high. So the systems are worthy of having some regulation. The fire marshals have whoever is in charge for the district has been managing and making sure the system is installed correctly. And again, this is a fire safety issue with some layover here. We have, firefighters using essentially breathing air, which for plumbers, anything that goes into the body, we're involved in. And part of it's just, we have a larger crew and we're able to build the system. So anyway, but
So we're using, are we using the medical gas certificate to put these in then?
we aren't.
Oh. I don't think we have any of these over here in Spokane. So.
I think you have to have a building more than 3 stories. Or I'm just joking.
It's certain amount above the fire access is how they read it, Larry. The other, it's covered under a completely different NFPA, not under the NFPA med gas component.
Okay, thanks.
Ken, if you'd like to add some more in there, perhaps correct me.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to be clear that Appendix L of the 2021 International Fire Code was discussed at the tag, the fire code tag in group 1, and which is this system, and it was not adopted. So this is kind of like an end around trying to use the plumbing code to get it adopted when all the fire tag said no and the council said no. And they're just like trying it again, but through the plumbing code.
Quick question for Ken. And this is just me wanting to know, I guess. So what is the plan to make these so that if I'm a contractor XYZ and I need to put one of these in the building, what's my game plan? Do I have to reinvent the wheel every jurisdiction I go into, or is there a thought to get this thing in a national model code that so it's codified, or
it is in a national model
it's in the NFPA, correct?
No, it's in the International Fire Code as an appendix.
Okay.
And again, just like any other appendix section, it's up to the local jurisdiction to adopt it.
Okay.
If somebody wanted to voluntarily install one of these systems, and then the fire marshal or fire code official wanted to review it, he could then use an alternate materials and methods and actually use the appendix section to review it. But I would think that the local fire officials say, we're not going to use this system. We already bring our own air there. We have our air systems. And we're not going to use your system that you want to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars for. So, it's up to them if they want to put it in. But in City of Seattle, we're not going to use it operationally.
Okay, thanks, Ken. I appreciate it. I just wanted to, we got a fireman here, so I figured I'd ask the question. Thanks.
Sure.
Okay, do we have any more discussion on this topic? Then I'll accept a proposal. Our motion, excuse me.
Hey, Corey Bilmasaki here. Move for rejection.
I have a motion to reject. Can I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion on the floor to reject this proposal. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. We will reject Appendix F. Next up on the agenda will be Section 913 air admittance valve. And I believe we have the proponent with us.
Mr. Chair, point of order.
Yeah, go ahead.
So you did vote on 038 and you moved forward Appendix M. And after you did that, we got some more information from the proponent. So you rejected Appendix N and you rejected Appendix F for different reasons. So my question is, do you want to keep 038 as approved, or you want to go back and vote on it again? There is a procedure that allows that. I just want to be sure that you're.
I was unaware of a procedure that would allow that since we'd already voted on it. So how does that procedure come into place if we've already voted and approved?
Let me show. Give me a sec. I think we're right here.
So what I need is a motion to reconsider.
If yes.
from someone who voted in favor of it.
Yes. Thank you, Krista.
Thank you, Krista. Do I have a motion to reconsider from anybody who voted to approve Appendix M? No motion. So
Then
we
it
are not
goes-
going to reconsider.
Okay. So we are going to 057.
Yes. Section 913 air admittance valve. Open up to the floor for discussion.
Or I'll take over if that's all right for a
Go ahead,
moment.
Micah.
Thanks, everyone. Micah Chappelle. I am the Washington Association of Building Officials Technical Advisory Committee Chair, Technical Code Development Chair. We put forth this proposal just because the code officials get this request so often as an alternate method. And so we would, upon further discussion, we decided to put this in the Seattle code last code cycle with support of hopefully someone's on the tag today. But it's been useful, you know, getting the feedback from the code officials. I don't think there's ever been a code official that has denied this. If there is, it's pretty rare when it does come across as an alternate method. So the thought was, why not put it into the code for the state as just a straight allowance without having to go through that alternate method material request every single time. We did look at the IPC language and brought over some of that in similar language, but not exact. Some of it's exact, some of it's similar. But we did what we thought was a better reorganization of that information and then added a few things to it. We specifically wanted to talk about where these are permitted, the installation, and of course the location, which gets to be very specific and covers you know, a lot of areas really that it's not be
You broke up,
these
Micah.
are
Okay, is that that's not just me, that's Micah turned into a robot?
Yeah, he did.
Okay. Are you back with us, Micah?
He said he was having connection issues earlier and he got kicked out a few times, so I suspect something's going on with that again.
Yeah, he may be coming back.
Mr.
Let's go to Larry. He's got his hand up while we wait for him, huh? Go ahead, Larry.
Yeah, I would speak against this. We've seen a lot of these fail. And I think it needs to be a discussion between the plumbing contractor and the code official on a one-on-one, because we don't want to get these things just rampant put in everywhere, because they're really not as good as what a good venting system is by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, there are some times where due to structural conditions that one of these may be used with talking to the code official. But I think from what I've seen them and how many we've replaced that have gone bad, and people don't know when they go bad, and then they get sick. We've had them sick in the mobile homes with these that they put in for years, and they get sores on their face. And this is some of what SARS was about too. And I don't think it's a good thing. And I've been doing plumbing since '77. And but when you go out and do service work and you see problems that have come up, these aren't, I mean, there's nothing better than a good venting system. It always works. It's self-cleaning, and these aren't. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Appreciate your comments. Next up was Steve Simpson.
Yeah, Mr. Chair. So I got a procedural question again. I guess that's probably because I was on the council for 9 years. So under WAC 5104025, so I don't see anywhere in the amendment where the amendment is needed to address the critical life safety need. The amendment clarifies the intent or application of the code. The amendment is necessary for consistency with state or federal laws or regulations. The amendment corrects errors or omissions. The amendment eliminates obsolete, conflicting, or duplicating unnecessary regulation. And I don't see where we get to how this thing got to us. If you use those parameters to how we get to the amendment. Once again, that's A through E for WAC 5104. So statewide and emergency statewide amendments to any of the codes. And so I'm just kind of curious how we got there.
So your point being that there's no criteria that is met to change the code?
Yeah, once again, he has it crossed off that it clarifies the intent or application of the code, but that would mean it was already in the code, and it's not. He's trying to add content, not clarify, in my opinion.
Stoyan or Krista, can you help with that?
Well, it's not necessarily, if you're adding something, again, personal opinion, it's not necessarily you're adding to clarify the code. Again, I haven't evaluated this in detail, this proposal, but you can submit a proposal to clarify something that's already in the code. It doesn't necessarily means that you have to modify the language. You can add to it to clarify it. Again, this is how I read it. You may disagree with me.
Okay, so let's continue with the, Steve, do you have something to rebut or add, or you?
No, I'll wait for further discussion. I just wanted to, I needed to find out that piece of it. I'm still, I'll wait for Micah to hopefully regain from where he left off.
Yeah, let's go ahead and jump to Mike again and let him finish, and then I'll come back for Larry and Bill Masaki. Go ahead. Mike.
Thanks, everybody. Sorry about that. Zoom has kicked me off. I want to say that's the 7th time today since I was in the IBC tag meeting this morning as well. I just trying to go through it. It does indicate that there is still a vent required, that you're not going to replace all your venting or through the roof venting with air admittance valves. And then it does also include the relief vent. And if we scroll down just a little farther, it does indicate some of the prohibited locations and gives you those four criteria for prohibited locations. And I think that would cover, where these would be allowed, where they won't be allowed, all that type of stuff, rating and size and all that kind of information that needs to go along with this. And I did hear some of the conversation to Steve's question on whether or not we can even propose this as clarifying the intent. The purpose of the codes are to provide minimum standards, controlling design, construction, installation, quality materials, location, all that kind of stuff. This does just that for an item that is obviously approved on a regular basis through an alternative method. This will provide probably a more efficient timeline for approvals, since it won't need a special approval coming from code officials or special, when you do an alternate means and methods, there has to be justifying criteria. And if you're doing that over and over and over, at some point you got to go, hey, this has been a standard item that is used. We should have this in the code or should be allowed in the state code. That happens quite a bit. I mean, if we go and say, hey, we can't add code because it doesn't clarify or some other reason, then it really puts a limit on how we can change the code, especially based on items that are being installed on a regular basis. So I missed some of the other conversation, but I'll cede the floor to everybody else and more discussion. Thanks.
Thank you, Micah. And we'll go back to Steve. If you had something to finish, you still have your hand up.
I'll take my hand down for a minute. I just forgot.
Okay. Larry, are you still wanting to say something?
Yeah, I mean,
Go ahead.
this should be brought up with the UPC code at the code council when we go to make meetings. And I think it's been brought up numerous times at the code council, and this would be all new code. And the place to bring this up is at the UPC meetings. And but not to backdoor it here. I mean, I mean, that's why we have the UPC code, so you can go out there and anybody in the UPC code can make a code recommendation. And then it's brought amongst the body, and then the body makes the decision. Here we're trying to shortchange it. Thanks.
Thank you, Larry. Bill, you still have discussion?
Yes, I do. To the proponent, Mike, on the criteria you selected, it clarifies the intent or application of the code, and specifically into this one. The unamended version is a venting system that uses no moving parts whatsoever. And your proposal here is to add a mechanical device to a venting system. So how can you explain to me how that clarifies intent or application? Because from my read, you're going in a completely different direction.
Okay, I'm not sure I understand your question. You're asking how this clarifies the intent of a mechanical device being allowed. This would clarify the intent of the code to provide guidance on construction installation. And so I guess I don't understand your question that well. And maybe somebody else could provide input on that.
Yeah, on the
what the
on
indication is that no one on this call has ever requested this as an alternate method, and that the only things that should be allowed are those that are passed through the code rulemaking process through another entity. That would indicate that there should be no way we can change something to provide guidance on when these are allowed or when these are requested to be allowed as an alternate method. I guess I'm missing something.
No, I see it as a proposal for an alternate method, but not clarifying what's already in the code. The code doesn't use a mechanical system for venting. This does, so it's completely different than what's prescribed right now. And I'm curious how that meets intent or application.
Okay, so as what I'm hearing is folks are not having an issue with the code change. They're having an issue with the criteria on where it meets the standard for a code change at the state. So with that question, I guess I don't have a clear answer, because we'll have a difference of interpretation on what providing clarity of intent or application of the code means. And maybe I'll use that argument for other proposals down the road, because it's one that is open for debate for sure. And I don't have an answer to probably convince you otherwise.
Bill, do you have any further rebuttal?
No, thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Ray Shipman, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna, I mean, with all due respect, I would prefer giving this as an means and methods approval, and not just put it into the standard body of the code. I think there's other ways of doing it. I've never been a fan of these. I'm gonna kind of go off of what Larry said as well. I think it's a failing system, but that's just my 2 cents. I would prefer that this be approved on a case-by-case basis, other than just thrown in the code as a standard procedure.
Thank you, Ray. Some hands went up. I'm gonna go. I think Bill just didn't pull his hand down. Micah?
So I guess a question to Ray or other code officials that are on here, would you require that, say you got a design for a new series of homes, say 150 homes, would you require that request for all 150 homes? And how would you process that? That's kind of my question. It sounds like what you're asking of the code officials, or at least this body's asking of the code official, is to provide an alternate means and method process for every single one of these that goes into every single structure. And that just seems, if you're approving these at a significant rate, an alternate means and method, then that's something that should be considered to be moved into the main body of the code. But that would be my question to Ray, is how you would process, say 150 or 200 of these. You would just duplicate that for every one. That just seems like one of those additional, mandates on the code official for something that is fairly simple and successfully used all the time as an alternate method.
I would respectfully, I wouldn't say used all the time. I would ask why they wanted to use it, and what is the reasoning between having to use this and not the standard method currently. I hope I'm understanding your question right, Micah. I feel that I think we've talked about it in other UPC meetings, that there's always a way to vent something. It just may not be the most convenient way. But I like the way it's written. I like the accessibility part of it, and it say something there, it has to be labeled. I like those options, but I think it's easily something that could go bad and not ever get fixed.
Thank you both. Let's move up to Steve Hart.
Yeah, hi, this is Steve Hart. So this code section 913 is at this time a allowance in the Seattle Plumbing Code. And there are many identifying needs that would, in the context that Ray Shipman just stated, that there's always a method to vent, but sometimes there are very expensive ways to vent, and air admittance valves are a suggested way to mitigate that cost or that impact, meaning that some floors are highly, secretive in what they do, or the fact that they have penetrations that can't enter them due to what they do within those units or on those floors. And things may happen above or below that would prevent penetration. So some are in the envelope of being very secure in what they do in them, as well as, like I say, secretive. And so they just don't want anybody running a vent through the floor just because they need to follow a prescriptive approach of a two-way vent, which an air admittance valve is not. It is a one-way vent. It works off of negative transients, or in other words, vacuum. So whereas a two-way vent works off of both transients, positive and negative. The only thing that is the concept behind this that has been argued and pitched back and forth in different arenas, from one code to another code, in that type of context of a debate, or the fact that it's an actual product in that debate. The real identifier that should be understood here is that, not that does it have a merit and a use at a time, because I will say that whether I like them or not, it does, but it's very, very rare. And most do it for economic reasons or other associated needs. But the reality is that what typically will happen is that, unlike a prescriptive venting system, which is not removing gases through a two-way vent, either out the roof or being vacuumed down into the building drain, these systems have and will fail. They may fail the day after they're installed, or they may fail a prescribed duration based on the use of it over time, but they will fail. And the bigger picture is, when you use them sparingly, the effect on the public health is marginal or minimal or no impact at all, or based on what location or near that failure happens, and the discharges up or downstream of that, and the admittance through a failed AAV happens, that could impact public health. The allowance to wholeheartedly allow them on a scale of statewide, you're asking for those public health little nicks to happen more on a percentage wise. Now, do I personally know of anybody who has been hurt, harmed from an air admittance valve that failed? No, I do not personally know anybody who has. I've been in structures that have had failed AAVs, and it's unpleasant. So for that being said, I wouldn't be in favor of allowing this on a statewide adopting, only because of the fact that they do fail. And if they're used not sparingly, but wholeheartedly just for economic reasons, meaning running one vent out of a roof and 10 AAVs within a structure, eventually one of those are going to fail. And over time, they will fail because that's what they do. They're not a two-way vent that are of a pipe system that will stay intact for as long as the material will stay intact for the life of the building, which is not true for AAV. As I stated, they could fail the day after installed or 20 years later. And I'm just making guesstimations. So that's my comment. And I would not approve of adopting this into the Uniform Plumbing Code holistically. I believe each jurisdiction should make that public health risk proposal on their own merit.
Thank you, Steve. Good comments. Larry, go ahead.
You know, I've been doing this since '77, and the only time I've ever seen them used that my company's used has been in a retrofit situation where there wasn't a way out. And I can't believe in new construction, I've never, in all the years that I've been in business, in new construction, not be able to get a vent out. And I think in the whole time that we've been in business, I think we've put one in that we couldn't get a vent out. And that's because we were over a bank vault. And but other than that, we've always been able to get a vent out. And to me, that's important because I know when I put that in, I'm not going to have a problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Steve Simpson.
Mr. Chair, if you'd accept the motion, I don't know if we're done with our discussion, but if you'd accept the motion, I'd move to reject this proposal on the merits of the discussion that we've had.
Second that.
I'd like to just hold. I don't want to cut Micah down. He was ready to speak. Could we just let him finish and then we'll do the motion? Can we do it that way? Go ahead, Micah.
Thanks. It seems like I see where this is going, but I don't necessarily want to kill something without some additional direction. What I've heard is it sounds like some folks that are somewhat against this may be open to allowing it for existing structures only to start, or possibly putting it as an appendix that can be adopted by those jurisdictions that want to use it so they don't have to go out and develop their own portion or code language here, kind of like we've done with other appendices. So would that be some maybe direction we could come back with at a future TAG meeting to, look at some additional proposal there or additional way to get this as an allowance for somebody to use that, whether it's through an appendices that the jurisdiction could adopt or as, use in existing structures, since that is what I've heard is the bigger problem and not new construction. Instead of just killing something, I'd like to see some direction. Thanks.
Okay, from the TAG committee, do we have anybody that is willing to put a motion forward to amend or adjust this particular proposal? Going once, twice. We don't have anybody willing to make an amendment to this proposal, so we'll go to Steve Simpson.
Mr. Chair, for the record, I will restate my motion. I move to reject this proposal based upon the discussions we've had here today.
I have a motion to reject. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Bill. We have a motion to reject this proposal. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it. We will reject your admittance valve proposal.
Thank you all for your time.
And last, but certainly not least, poor John Sue has been here this whole time waiting to discuss secondary roof drain sizings for UPC Chapter 11. John, could you please start us off with some discussion?
Sure, thank you. It's been interesting. I'm learning things. That's always good. So this proposal is mainly to align the plumbing code with what's happening on the structural side. I'm a structural engineer by trade. I'm involved in the development process of ASCE 7, which is the load standard for structural design. And something that's changed in the last cycle is that they are requiring roofs to be either drained or designed for a larger storm than previously. And so what we are proposing here is to get the plumbing code basically aligned with the structural code. Essentially, when you go through all the numbers out of ASCE 7, they give you the inches per the 15-minute duration 100-year storm. Essentially, the rainfall rate is about double what's the current rate that's shown in the tables in Appendix D of the UPC. And excuse me, all the tables for drain sizing are based on the 1 hour per 60-minute duration 100-year storm. So essentially, what we're proposing here is saying your prescriptive option, just so that you don't overload your roof, is to use double the rainfall rate and I believe it's just for secondary drains. It's supposed to be, I think, yeah, for secondary drains and your scuppers, which are your kind of emergency drainage system. The exceptions allow you to go ahead and get an engineered design if you want to go that route, and design for the larger storm. You got to worry about ponding, which is the increase of basically turning the roof into a swimming pool, and that gets you might be able to do a different design, but the quick out is just use double the rainfall rate for all your tables. The table, again, if you go back to Appendix D, they have some prescribed rates for the Washington, a couple places in Washington. I have to say that the maps provided by NOAA are difficult to work with. But I don't know what people are using. So I don't know what people use today other than something that's close to the table in Appendix D. That's essentially what we're trying to accomplish here. There's lots of places, unfortunately, several places where it has to get fixed. And so it looks like a lot more, but it's only dealing with either double the size or get an engineered design.
Thank you very much, John. Do we have any other discussion on this? Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, thanks for the floor. John, so this is just on the secondary drainage. So just on the emergency drainage component.
Yes.
Just so so we're not talking about doing anything to the primary drainage whatsoever. Okay. It's not double sizing it. All we're doing is dealing with just the secondary drainage piece.
That's correct, which would include scuppers.
Scuppers, second, okay. The other thing, and maybe Krista and or someone, Stoyan can help. There is a component within the State Building Code Council as far as correlation of the codes. So if the codes are within conflict of one another, somehow that would get fixed during that process. Is that where we fix this, or do we just add an amendment in the plumbing code to address that piece and then let the correlation happen downstream, or just a question?
Can I respond real quickly to that one? My concern, Steve, if we were to try to do that, I don't know where that correlation would happen. I'm not sure where else. To me, this needs to get handled by the folks who put the plumbing in, right? Put the pipes in. They need to know how to size their piping, and that's why I proposed it for the UPC.
Would John, is there any need to have any pointers pointing you to the structural code of why this needs to happen? Does that, you know what I mean? Because when there's a change, refer to IBC, what, you know what I mean? Or that's,
and so to me, that's part of the training issue. You don't, that to me, that's commentary.
Okay.
And I think I know I've heard Stoyan say in other, maybe I shouldn't speak for him, in other forums, that they're hoping to be able to document some of the whys of these changes. So that to me, that the why isn't a code issue. It's the, well, you don't write it into the code.
Okay, thank you.
During this rulemaking cycle, we are trying to include a little bit more detailed rationale. So, for each change, there will be a little bit more explanation why the change was proposed and adopted, and not only what was proposed and adopted. And also we will start with the building code, developing a document that will have the rational part of the document, but that's, if we can have a complete team. Currently we're 2 down, so.
And I will say, Steve, that the reason statement does include the why. I hope anyway it was clear.
It does, yes. So we are using a table, and one column it says what are we doing, and the other column says why. So I think following the rulemaking documents, I think there will be a good explanation on that.
Okay, thank you. Let's go up to Bill Masaki.
Yeah, thank you, Corey. To the proponent, John, this appears to go beyond just the overflow systems. I'm reading down in your proposal, we get to section 1103, and that addresses vertical and horizontal storm drain piping. So everything would be sized based on double the rainfall rate. Is that correct?
No, I did try to tie it directly to the secondary roof drains. If you look at 1103.1, let's see. Yeah, the sentence that's underlined there, it is just secondary roof drains, vertical conductors and leaders for the secondaries.
Okay.
Now, if you get down to the horizontal storm drains and sewers, similarly, if they're receiving drainage from the secondary roof drains, then you have to size them up also.
Got it. Thank you, John.
Okay, next up would be Steve Hart. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is Steve Hart. So I understand the concept here, and I'm going to make the assumption this is through climate change and rainfall rates that either are maybe not as accurate as they once were, and we have better ways of recording data, and that's been one of the needs here, where we've been able to identify in certain or specific areas a larger grouping of rain in a shorter period of time, resulting in ponding and potential roof collapse or failure. So therefore, the design must be in accordance with the outside environment, meaning the precipitation that's falling to these roofs. But one of the effects of this proposal would be that currently right now, it would probably be a substantial increase in either pipe sizing, should or the proposal be to make a combination system of a primary and a secondary. And we call a secondary, the secondary drainage, everybody calls it the emergency or overflow. So currently right now, most rainfall systems from a roof are designed in the capacity, what's called a combination, or they tie the secondary into a vertical portion of the primary in a Y configuration. And then they, from that point, use what's called the 2-hour rainfall rate, because they've tied two collection points, meaning the primary and the secondary, which can and are receiving rainfall at the rate in this state, specifically Seattle, of 1 hour of rainfall per receptor. So if each receptor can receive 1 hour of rainfall, then if they're tied together, that then becomes double the rainfall. And when they are tied together, it increases the pipe sizing of the system from the roof all the way down to the base of the building, where it could terminate in the storm, or in the case of Seattle, a combination storm sewer system. But the effect of having a double the rainfall rate on the overflow has the same effect. Now you're asking for the system to be sized in a grouping of a total primary plus the secondary at 2, primary at 1 rainfall rate, a total of 3 inch per hour of rainfall rate. And if it were to be tied together, you would be discharging at a 3-hour rainfall rate. And that would be a little bit increase in the pipe size system, or you would have to separate the system or make language that said that's not what's occurring.
Okay, Steve, let me respond to that. If whoever's, I guess it's Stoyan, if you could scroll up to 1101.12.2.2.2. That's combined systems down at the bottom of the page. Yeah,
Combined
start
system.
with that.
An
and
extra
down-
two, Stoyan.
the combined system at the bottom of the page.
Okay.
Here you go. Thank you. I did check with a couple other plumbing folks. Again, not being a plumber, I did check with a couple folks who have been doing plumbing for a long time on this. We are not changing the combined system. So you can still, because they felt that since it was already doubled the size, it's already designed for double the size, by the way, a combined system. That it was not necessary to upsize it any more than that. So right now, it's, if you look at the bottom, the last sentence there, that's existing language. And so we haven't changed that. You're still basing it on double the rainfall rate, which is essentially what your secondaries would now be designed for. And yes, you might have to upsize pipes in some cases. You might have to add more drains too. I mean, that's the other thing, you might have to add more secondaries, but the idea is that it's not necessarily, well, okay, let me put it this way. The proposal went through, excuse me, at ASC 7 based on failures that people have been seeing, and yes, much better rainfall data. They have more stations and things that they can get data from, and they've made this determination that they think that we've been under designing roofs. All right, and they decided to go to, let's get the water off the roof rather than having to design for ponding.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, John. I think Larry Andrews is next. If I'm wrong, I'm sorry, Bill. Go ahead, Larry.
Yeah, we experienced a bad disaster here on a Rosar supermarket where we had about 3-4 feet of snow. Then the scuppers got plugged up, and then the rains came. And literally 3/4 of the supermarket went down to the floor. And when I seen some of this up here, it looked like you were going back to 100%. And I would lean more to the 200% in our area anyway, because of what we've seen happen here. It was unbelievable to see what happened, but that's what happened. We had large snowfall. Then we had southern winds came in with the rain, and all the scuppers, the snow went into the scuppers, so we didn't, and then the drains plugged up and we didn't have nothing. And then the next thing you knew, you had the whole luckily nobody got killed. It was just a pure miracle.
Yeah. Unfortunately, this proposal would not deal with that. It assumes that you have a working secondary system. rain on snow, excuse me, was an issue in the Puget Sound area back in when was it, 1990-ish? We had a big storm. It had some similar issues. So 1997, excuse me, I think. We had similar issues. So yeah.
But when you scrolled up, it looks like if you would scroll up a little bit to the higher point, it looked like to me it was talking about keeping the secondary at normal the rainfall. And I think the secondary should be double the rainfall myself, because the primaries already failed. And now I got a ton of water setting on the top of this sucker. And now I need to make sure that there ain't hardly anything gets up there now. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah. Well, the way it's written, I think, if people will have read it differently, let me know. It is for the secondaries are using double the rainfall rate. The exception is essentially if you want to design your roof for this extra loading, including accounting for the sag in the roof as you get more weight on it. It sags more, so it's going to hold more water. If you want to go through that whole process, you have to still use the higher level storm. It's not the same storm that you're designing the current system to. So you get more rainfall. You have to design for that, and then you have to engineer your roof for whatever drainage you've got.
Yeah, the thing I seen is there was like 3 feet of water on top of that roof. I mean, I don't think that roof can take that kind of weight.
No, obviously it didn't.
Yeah, right. So I wouldn't want to make it any less than, if anything, that secondary system needs to be better than the primary, because you've got an emergency now.
Yeah. And it is right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Larry. Can you drop your hand, please? Bill Masaki, Go ahead.
Yes, the combined systems, we install a lot of those around here. Getting rid of that secondary system is a lot more economical for the building owners, less pipe we have to put in. And right now I'm wishing I was back in my classroom and had my whiteboard so I could draw this out. So let me describe this as best I can. Let's say, for example, we had a system we sized and we determined that the primary roof drain was 4-inch. So we'll have an overflow that's also 4-inch. Now, if we want to tie those two together on the vertical, we take that common piping and go double the rainfall rate and run it out. The way I'm seeing this implemented is that the secondary system is going to have to be all the way totally sized for double the rainfall rate. And in our example, if we doubled that and it took us to a 6-inch, I see us having a 4-inch primary drain, a 6-inch secondary drain, and then that little bit of vertical, then that horizontal piping where it goes over and connects the combined system would also be a 6-inch line, and then 6-inch on out the building. Is that a fair application of what you're trying to accomplish here?
Not having done again the actual plumbing, the piping sizing, I'm gonna have to defer that to someone else who's better experienced with that. But I think that would be the concept that you once you've dumped secondary drainage water into a system, however that system gets to the storm drain or wherever it ends up off site, that whole system is designed for double the rainfall rate. And so looking at the the tables in chapter 11 there, let me pull that up real quick here. It's based on your size of your pipe and your rainfall rate and the flow, your GPMs. Again, it depends on how many drains you've put in and what size of area they're draining, right? Yeah. So I don't know if I can answer that, I guess.
Steve Hart, go ahead.
Yeah, hey, thanks a lot. I'll just use a real quick example. if I had a combined storm system and I was carrying a 3,000 square foot roof, I would have to move myself to a 4-inch drain to combine those two together. If I was using a 3,000 square foot roof and I had a primary and I was running that at 1-inch because it's going out solo, I would only need to use a 3-inch. My secondary in your scenario proposal, John, would require me to use a 4-inch drain. If I combine those two together, the way I'm reading your language is that I would stay still at the 2-inch rainfall rate, but the secondary, receptor drainage would be sized for 2 hour. That would mean that it really wouldn't change the storm drain system. So I'm not really sure what the proposal is here. I agree with you that, I understand the proposal. Let me back up. I understand your proposal, and I agree with the fact that there is a change in how much precipitation we have in short periods of time. And the only way that this is really applicable is when the primary cannot discharge fast enough at the rate of the rainfall, and the secondary becomes the second receptor to discharge. But the only way it really benefits the system is to discharge solo, separately, 2 different systems. And if they were connected together and they were still sized at the 2-hour rainfall rate, the pipe sizing wouldn't change.
Yeah, if you're going to combine them, because if you're combining in your combined system, it's already sized for double.
Right. And the average around here, I'm going to guess, is probably somewhere in the neighborhood of, I'll just take a stab in the dark, but some of these guys who are out there in the industry daily and reviewing these plans daily, like maybe Harpreet Sandhu, who is on here, who reviews these plumbing designs, as well as maybe Bill Masaki, who is part of this industry here. I don't see but a very small single-digit and low single-digit number of independently primary discharge and independently secondary discharge. They are typically, I'm going to guess, and this is my opinion, in the 90% range or greater as a combined system.
And in which case, then this doesn't have that much impact, right?
It wouldn't, no, it would, but somebody who chose to do them as independent discharges, it would, because you would be discharging the secondary at a larger pipe size system than the primary. And just for your practical knowledge, John, the way that stormwater systems are discharged, having a medium flow through them, meaning whatever the case may be, rain primarily, we hope, is that they're designed at full flow. That's how they're designed. And that's why when they change from vertical to horizontal in their design, they can sometimes go from, and typically one pipe size in the vertical, and the minute they go horizontal, they immediately upsize one pipe size. Okay. And so that's how it works. But for, like you're stating, if it in effect of would only be those that separated their systems, would be an economic increase. And that's the only place I can see that happening if it didn't change the sizing of a combined storm drain system. It wouldn't have an effect on it, except for the fact that that secondary roof drain would actually probably be a larger inflow or surface area for the admittance of 2-hour rainfall. I mean, your primary might be 3-inch and your secondary might actually be 4-inch.
Yeah, however it gets designed. I mean, technically the piping could get up on the roof itself if you actually have secondary drains versus scuppers. Your piping on the roof might, if you keep your drains in the same locations, the piping might get bigger because it's got to be sized for more.
Yeah, and I think, and this is probably before any motions made or anything, I could agree with this just in general, but it would be nice to have some empirical data of, you know, how ASCE came about this and maybe an example or two.
Okay, I mean, might be able to get some quotes out of the commentary, which is where we would find that information.
That would be great. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Steve. Go ahead, Sandy.
Going back to where we would see a lot of these, the separated systems. I mean, typically when we're reviewing the plans, you know, the taller the building, the more they lean towards the combined system. But when we get into the smaller 5-story, 6-story, a lot of them do use just the separated system. So whether that would be an impact on the smaller contractor or builder, I don't know how much of an impact it would have on those type of projects. And, you know, just as a note that we get more of those than we do of the bigger, larger buildings. They are more right now, currently now, that is pretty much the majority of the plans that we get submitted is the smaller ones coming through now. Little apartment buildings or mixed use, you know, 5, 6, 7 stories, and that's what we'll see. So that's just the comment ahead for the plan review side of it.
Thank you. Steve, you still have your hand up. I think maybe did anybody have any more discussion?
Sorry.
It's okay. Was there any more discussion on this proposal? If not, I'm ready for a motion.
Corey, Bill Masaki here. I move for approval.
I'll give it a second.
Thank you. I have a motion, a second to approve this proposal. Let's have, excuse me. Sorry. I have a motion and a second to approve. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
Was that a late aye or a nay? I think it was
a late
one.
aye.
I think it was a late aye. I believe we have, let's try that again. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. We are going to move that forward, proposal for UPC Chapter 11 secondary drain sizing to the BFP committee.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thanks, John.
The next item on our agenda is, I'm sorry, Storian, did you need to say something?
Yes, this is how your work today look like. With green, what was approved, and with red, what was rejected.
That looks accurate to my information.
Okay.
Do we need to do we have approved each one to move to the BFP. And so I think we're good to move forward to off of this business, or do we need a proposal in general or a motion in general to move everything forward?
No.
Okay.
Good enough.
Item number 5 is other business. Does anybody have any other business? Hearing none, we can move to adjourn, and I'd like to thank everybody for participation today, including Stoyan and Annette and Krista, because they're working double time and had a busy day today. And I hope you enjoyed our UPC tag more than you did the other.
Yes, I did. And I have one question before we leave.
Oh, go ahead.
So we don't have more proposals, and I'm not planning to schedule another technical advisory group meeting, but if you think that we may need one, let me know and I'll do it.
And so, as I understand the process, we're moving these proposals forward to the BFP. That'll go through its process and get moved forward to the council. If the council decides something else, we may have to revisit a tag.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so at this point, I think we're good, but it'll depend on the vote of the council when we get there, I suppose.
Okay, good enough for me.
Is everybody good on that? Just in clear, I mean, I think we knew we were gonna come through this agenda today, and anyway, it's my first tag, so I want to thank everybody for helping so much. And you too, Ray. All right, so I move to adjourn this meeting.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. You guys have a
Thanks.
great day.
See ya.
Thank you all.